Good morning and welcome to ASI's Tuesday morning show, where ASI's most outspoken editors talk promo products. I'm CJ Mitica, editor of Wearables magazine, and I'm joined by Teresa Hagel. She's senior staff writer for Wearables and Stitches magazine. And Teresa, it seems you've been doing a lot of travel recently.
Yeah, I've been in North Carolina twice in like a month. That was kind of crazy. But yeah, the one day was for less than 24 hours though, so I barely really saw any.
So what were you in North Carolina for?
I went to, first for Stitches for the next installment of our Can This Shop Be Saved story. So there was an embroidery shop down there that needed some help, and I went with Joyce Jagger, the embroidery coach, and we helped them. Well, we're helping them to get back on their feet, I guess.
Great.
And then the other one was to go to a screen printing class at a community college there, so that was kind of cool too.
Awesome, that sounds great. And so for that story will be in our June issue, actually our August issue, Wearables. That's right. Yeah,
It better be August.
It better be August. Sorry to spring that surprise deadline on you. Well, this week we got the ASI show in New York, so we have some editors there this week. There's a lot of exciting things going on, and today actually we will be joined by an expert, Danny Friedman. Danny is the vice president of Added Incentives Inc. He has over 25 years of sales experience, including 18 years in the promotional products industry. And he's a multi-million-dollar producer for clientele that includes some of the top companies in the Fortune 500. And Danny's also been a sales manager and sales trainer for the last 12 years. Good morning, Danny, and welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
We're doing great. So, Danny, you're going to be speaking at our upcoming ASI show in Chicago, and I know you're giving a couple sessions there. One of them is the title Master Negotiation Skills, Handle Price Objections and Close More Sales. So that's a topic we want to talk about a little more today. You know, in the magazines, we hear from readers all the time that all buyers care about are really just the lowest price. So, you know, in your experience, do you find that to be true?
Well, I hear that. I don't think it's always true, and we're definitely in a different world where the access to information, the access to pricing is unbelievable. I mean, I have buyers today that will email me item numbers from suppliers with pricing. So it's a much more shrewd buyer out there. But I think it's very cognizant. The pricing is very much on their mind, but I don't always think it's the case. I really think that yes, buyers will tell you we want the best price, we want the lowest price, but deep down, buyers, purchasing agents, excuse me, really what they want is peace of mind. They want their life easier, and even more so, they don't want to. This is going to sound odd, but it's the truth. They don't want to look bad to their superiors. Mm-hmm. They don't want to get yelled at. They don't want so yes, price is a big issue, and it's probably bigger today because of the access to information. But I don't think it's always the case.
Okay, and so I tend to agree with you. I think that we hear and we see it too when we talk to people for the magazine that people want low price until something goes wrong, and then and then it's an issue, and then they're willing to pay. We might be willing to pay more to get that peace of mind. So that sometimes we talk about that being value, and so how can distributors deliver that value, that peace of mind to their clients?
Well, first off, you can't bring up price immediately when you start working with a prospect or a client. That should never be brought up. But that being said, how do you deliver yourself? We're in an industry where distributors like myself, we're really brokers. I mean, we all have the same vendors that we access, so we're all getting the same items. Some people may have different pricing structures, but for the most part, everybody's going to the same vendor pool. So what differentiates yourself from other distributors, and what differentiates yourself from the price game? And that is yourself. You're selling yourself. You're selling your service. You're selling unique and creative ideas. Your real goal is to become the promotional products department of all your clients. That's the goal. And you do that by, first off, golden rule, doing what you say you're going to do. If you say something and you say you're going to do something, then you have to do it. You have to come through, and really making yourself indispensable to your client, making them know that, yeah, maybe there's less expensive products out there, but at least I know when I call Danny, I can put the phone down. I know it's going to be taken care of.
So, I mean, I mean, what are some things a distributor can do to fix that or to change that?
To change that mindset of pricing only?
Yeah, if they say, if they're only thinking about the price is too high and they're not going to buy at that figure, what can a distributor do to kind of change their minds?
Well, they have to. A distributor needs to. First of all, one thing that a lot of people don't do, because there's so many products on the marketplace, you always have to make sure it's apples to apples. Especially if somebody says, "Well, I saw this item," because you get this all the time. You'll get an email that says, "You just quoted me for this item, and I just saw it for 40 cents less." You have to make sure it's apples to apples, even to the point where I'll have clients send me samples, or I'll send them samples just to make sure, because sometimes it isn't the same. Sometimes there is something that's slightly different that makes it less expensive. But to get back to your point, it's not an easy one. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy to get past price, especially once people are locked on that. But you have to convey to them why your services are worth that. I don't want to say extra price, but why your services are worth what they are, and that is being unique. We're in a time-sensitive business. It's unbelievable how nowadays I think probably 10 to 20% of my orders are rush. I mean, it used to be, and I remember back in the Stone Age when rush service was 2 weeks. Now there's companies that have same-day service. So you have to really prove yourself to be indispensable and have your clients know that, I'm not overly concerned with price because I know that my distributor is going to come through for me.
Okay. So all that said, though, is there ever a time when, dropping the price or, discounting something makes sense?
Yeah, and I can't stand discounting. I don't like the word discounting. I don't like giving away money. You can ask my wife and daughters. I don't like giving away money. But there are times where, first of all, in a bid situation, okay, which is a different where you are one of potentially a number of distributors that are going for the same project. Then you have to probably lower what your normal price is, because I always tell people, you got to be thinking as a distributor 40% as an average margin. That should always be your goal, is 40% as an average margin, because there's going to be times where you get more than that. There's going to be times where you get less than that. But 40 is a good average margin. So, but to get back to when to discount, so obviously a bid situation. Obviously, if there is an error on an order, if something goes wrong, and then hopefully you will be able to also work with your supplier that the issue happened. So there's times with that. But in my mind, that's probably the only times you do that. I mean, there is a third time, and here's a unique situation, and this is you want to get into a client, and you want to open up their eyes. And you can tell them all day how great your service is and how creative you are, and that's great. But sometimes they're all about the bottom line. And what that entails is sometimes when working with a new person, you have to go in a little lower than maybe you normally would. And then once you build that relationship, because I truly believe that the promotional products industry is probably the most purest form of relationship selling there is, because you're really selling yourself, because everybody can get the same products. But then you go in a little bit low initially, and then you slowly build up your margins as you build that relationship.
So I'm curious, Danny, just in those cases, you say, with a new customer, maybe going a little lower at the beginning. Do you tell them that you're going lower than you might normally would, or if not, then I guess how do you sort of raise, slowly increase, those margins over time?
Well, what'll happen is I won't tell somebody, I'm coming in low so I can get your business, and then I'm going to jack up your prices so I can make a lot of money off of you. That typically doesn't go well. But no, what I will do is I will come in aggressive, not terribly aggressive, but I'll come in a little bit aggressively, especially if I know it's a company that has a lot of people they're working with, or they're already working with somebody. I'll come in a little bit lower than I normally would, and they'll be aware of it. They'll notice the price change. And then, hopefully the project will go well, and then there will be another project. And then it's really, you got to gauge your feel for the client in your relationship, and that's really asking questions, and that's really the most important thing, is finding out what makes your client tick, and then you can slowly, you hopefully, and I've been fortunate, I've been in the business for almost 20 years, that you can get a gauge of when you can start going back to probably your normal margins.
Okay, so I guess from the start, before you even get to price, are there ways that you can sort of avoid these price objections in the first place?
Well, when talking to a new client or a prospect that's hopefully going to become a potential client, I never talk price. Mm-hmm. I talk about my services. I talk about my creativity. I talk about the support I get from my office, which I will pass on to my client or potential prospect. I rarely talk price. I may let them know that because of the amount of business I do, I get better pricing, so I can pass that on. I may state that, I may not. But the key is you need to train your clients to do business the way you want to do business and not the way they want to do business. Now, that sounds very adversarial, but it's not. Because I've always felt in my years of sales that everybody should win. I don't think sales should be adversarial. In our industry, I should make money, a supplier should make money, and a client should get a quality product on time at a fair price. Everybody should win. So that being said, that's what you have to pass on in your initial meetings with new clients or prospects, is everything you're going to do to them. And really what it is doing is you're letting them know how you're going to make their life easier. And who doesn't want their life easier? Once you bring up price, or if you bring up price initially, it's over. You're not. Once you open up Pandora's negotiation box, you're done, because then your prospect or your new client is always going to be talking price, and you're going to play ping pong of negotiating bids and quotes. And so it's really key at the first contact or initial meeting with a prospect or client to not discuss price whatsoever.
Okay, so yeah, you say that bringing up price first is a big mistake, but what are some of the other common mistakes that distributors make when it comes to pricing?
Well, a big mistake I see is, first of all, being scared. Being scared when they're sending a quote to somebody and worried, am I going to be too high? Don't worry about that. Go in with your fair price, be confident, and go in with your quote. My favorite saying is when you send somebody a quote and they come back and say, is that your price? That's my favorite. No, that's not my best price. I was joking. Here's my best price. So I mean, yes, of course that's my best price. That's why I sent you the quote. People, if you want to negotiate, you can go to a flea market or something like that. You're paying for a service. You are paying for pens, mugs, polo shirts, but you're really paying for a service. That's really what you're paying for. So, that is a big mistake, obviously, talking price. Another thing is when there may be a problem, or even if a client, because everybody has them that always do want to negotiate price, where they say, is that your best price, or what can you do? People initially will come back. Let's say, for example, a pen costs $1, and a client says, is that your best price? And then they'll say, what can you do? And people will get nervous and they'll say, well, I'll drop it to 80 cents. I'll drop it 20 cents. Okay? That's a monumental mistake. You're giving away money. What you need to do is, when a client says that, is you need to come back with the question, what price were you thinking of, or where do you need to be? Because then potentially once you go back at the client with that, they may say, well, I was hoping to be at 90 cents. Okay? So now, instead of you giving away 80 cents versus the 90, you've saved yourself 10 cents. May not seem a lot, but if you're selling 10,000 of an item, that's $1,000. So it's real money. So there's a lot of people, a common mistake are people giving away money they don't have to give away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Danny. That's some really, really great advice, and you can catch more of that at Danny's sessions at the ASI show, Chicago. Well, thank you, Danny, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
All right, you too. All right, so that's some great information. I want to switch gears a little bit. Teresa, you can talk a little bit about some hiring philosophies.
Yes, hiring for attitude and not skill. So basically, a lot of people when they're hiring, they want to just, they kind of tick off the boxes of like, do you know this, do you know this, do you know that, like all the things on a resume. But this article is saying that you should be looking more at like softer qualities, because any skills can be trained, and also skills kind of change, especially with how fast technology moves. So, her point is that most people do not possess all the skills that are listed in a job description, whether that's because, employers have overly high expectations, or, schools are not preparing, these students enough for the real world. Doesn't really matter. I mean, no one's going to be that 100% match. So what you should be looking for is someone who has the right personality and temperament for the position. So if you hire for like a good attitude, that's going to open up the wider pool of candidates. You can train them. And, like I said, you can't really anticipate those hard skills that are going to be needed several years out. You can hire someone for everything you need now, but 5 years from now, there's going to be some new social media site or some new programming language or some other new technology that you wouldn't even have been thinking of. So you're going to have to train them anyway. So you might as well pick someone who is good to work with and eager to learn and, has those softer skills, because you can train them for everything else.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because with our magazines, I think this really applies. Because when we're hiring writers, and your example of this, I'm an example of this when I joined this company, how many writers know about the promotional product industry and know it back and forth?
Nope.
Very very few. So when we're looking for writers, we're looking for people who have those journalism skills and those writing skills, and then they learn about the promotional product industry and get up to speed. I mean, how long did it take you to sort of get a sense of this industry? You can say you haven't yet.
No. I feel like the first 3 or 4 months here, I was kind of like, what is going on? Especially because of all the technical like screen printing and embroidery stuff. So I'm like, I would just like go home and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is crazy. But then at a certain point, it all sort of like clicks. I mean, I certainly still don't know everything, but I feel like I know how to write or ask the right questions, and can figure it out. But it is a totally different kind of thing than I've ever written about. So it definitely takes a little time to know.
But writers who have the skills can pick it up and then do well for us. I mean, and how many Neils do you have now? Like eight or nine? Is that
a million?
Is that it?
No. Yeah. I guess there's like three sitting up there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. So that definitely high for attitude, not for skill.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about networking, my worst fear. So here's a question for you, Teresa. Do you consider yourself an introvert?
Yes.
Yeah,
very much so.
Pretty much. I'm in the same boat, and so it's funny because when Michelle Bell, editor at SGR, anytime I'm at an industry event, she's like, "Oh, did you go to the parties and meet anyone?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, like do you want me to just walk in a room where I don't know anybody and just make friends and have fun?" It's like, no, not exactly. So it's very difficult for introverts like ourselves to network, and I think this article had some interesting ideas, and we'll talk a little bit about them. One of the things it talks about is networking, making connections online, and I think that's something that we're doing, like we do a lot, and I think a lot of people do in their jobs already. But it helps me greatly when if I go to a show, one of our ASI shows, for example. If I already know the person, as far as like we've talked online, then it's much easier for me to go up to them and sort of to talk, because we already have that connection. So you could do that too with at different events if you either know someone already, or just even just like a little bit with like LinkedIn perhaps, or even Twitter. Yeah,
you can find out a lot of information about them ahead of time too. So
that makes it much easier. Another thing is to take notes. I don't know about you. I'm sometimes like really bad with names if I meet someone at an event, because I'm trying to think of like what's my next like question or witty thing is going to be saying. I'm not like concentrating on what their name is, and then like 5 minutes later I like completely forget what their name is.
Well, yeah, because instead of trying to be a good active listener, you're just like nervous about like, okay, how am I going to come off, or how am I going to be normal, and I don't know, that kind of thing. Yeah, I have a lot of those anxieties, and issues. But yeah.
Yeah, so they talk about I do think this advice is handy. Is when you meet someone, repeat their name. That's a good way to remember. If they give you a card, like look at the card, and then after you're done talking with them, you can just like write a quick note in your phone, or when I'm at a show, I have my notepad.
Right,
but
right.
you write something down so then you can remember that person. You can follow up with them after the show or the event and remember their name. And this last tip. Don't overthink it. And so it says, when you go home, leave your interactions and networking attempts alone emotionally. No need to go over and over what you said.
That's good advice.
Yeah, we've all been there. But it's funny because have you ever heard of a book called Quiet by Susan Cain?
I've heard of it and I want to read it. But
I've been like an evangelist for this book,
Yeah.
but it talks a lot about just sort of how introverts function in our world and how just increasingly difficult it is. Talks a lot about like the biological stuff.
Right.
But it just drives home the point that like not everybody's just a natural born networker. You can just go into a room and sort of like glad hand people and do things, and it just takes like practice. And I think like tips like this too can sort of give you a cushion, make you feel like a little more comfortable.
Well, I think another problem I've always had with networking is that it always feels fake to me. Like you feel like I don't know, like everyone's talking to each other to try and get something out of them, and it's like very artificial. So
it's funny you say that, but if you ask like extroverts, they think it's just like it's just how like humans connect.
Yeah, I know, but to me it just seems bizarre. It's like
Yeah, I mean I understand your point, but I think I mean also like it's you are creating like relationships. You want to be like friendly with
well,
people,
yeah. When if you try to look at it like that, it helps. But just like when I was younger, especially, I always thought like this just seems so artificial, so silly. But when you start to think like, oh, it really does. You're helping them, they're helping you. You're meeting new people. If you look at it like that, it does.
Yeah, I mean, or you don't have to be so cold about it. Like
Yeah.
if you just think it's I'm just there to get business, and then it does feel that way. But I guess if you're there just to like some people say I'm just there to like to meet people or make friends. There is something to that, especially you see that in sales too. People say I only sell to my friends or something like that. Because they strike like personal relationships.
Right.
So I think if you look at it that way, that might help.
Probably.
She's still skeptical, folks. All right, well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you to Danny Friedman for joining us on our show, and thank you everyone for listening today, and please join us next week.